Hi, everyone, and welcome to Trade and Tariff Tuesdays. We're back with another edition of Avalara's webinar series discussing the Trump administration's tariffs and their impact on trade compliance. My name is Ashley, and I'll be your host. Before we dive in, I just have a couple housekeeping items. First, a friendly reminder that Avalara cannot provide legal or tax advice. On your screen is our safe harbor policy. Please take a moment to review that. We are recording today's event, and you'll receive the recording later today. The console you're looking at can be customized, so feel free to move or resize the windows. The additional resources section contains a lot of great related resources, including today's slide deck. I also want to call out that we are hosting a special edition of this Trade and Tariff series on Thursday, and our presenters will go more into that later. There are several ways to engage with the presenters and attendees today. So first, if you have any questions, you could submit them using the Q&A chat box. We will save time for Q&A at the end, and we have some presenters on the back end to help answer questions throughout the presentation as well. So you'll see those answers pop up. Second, you can join our attendee group chat. You'll click the icon at the bottom of your screen with 2 chat bubbles, and that will pop up on the screen, and we encourage you to introduce yourself, network, and discuss today's topic. Third, you can react to the presentation by clicking the emoji icon and reacting to give presenters some real-time feedback. And then lastly, a reminder that this webinar is designed to be quick. We're just scheduled for 30 minutes today and interactive, so therefore it is not eligible for CPE credit. All right, our presenters today, we have 2 Avalarans joining us. First, we have Shane Bogdan, Director of Sales at Cross Border. And then in the chat, answering some questions, we have George Trantis, Senior Director of Global Marketplaces. So Shane, I'll hand it over to you.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks, Ashley, again. And George, thanks for joining us as well. I know you're fielding questions as they come in. So if you have any questions, feel free to send them through the chat. And George has been doing a great job week over week in terms of answering these things, and he'll chime in as needed across the board here. So again, thanks for joining us. This is week 7 here. We're continuing to get great attendance across the board. This will be an interesting one because really we're going to do kind of a recap in terms of everything since February 1st and over those past 7 weeks, because kind of essentially it's all leading up until tomorrow in terms of what's going to actually happen with this whole Liberation Day and this April 2nd date. So as Ashley alluded to before, we are going to hold a kind of roundtable discussion, fireside chat style, on Thursday with as much information as we can get into some slides and kind of go over anything that comes out tomorrow, which we're assuming is going to be quite a bit of information, a lot of question marks over the past 7 weeks and since when this April 2nd date was announced. So more to come. So please register for that one on Thursday. Again, we'll get as much synthesized as possible. Today, we will review the timeline again and some new slides. Just to let everybody know, we are reviewing all the feedback. We know that the timeline's getting long and some of the content has been repurposed a few times. So, over the next 48 hours or so, we expect quite the refresh of things moving forward across the board here. But we appreciate the attendance over the past few weeks. And just kind of another housekeeping here, we have 2 shows going on currently right now. So if anybody's currently over in Amsterdam, the Global Supply Chain and Logistics Summit is currently happening. So Patrick Frith and Craig Reed, who's our cross-border GM, they're actually over there right now. So if you are in Amsterdam, happen to be there, go find them, say hello, ask them any questions across the board. And then next week, the NCB FAA annual conference is taking place out in Phoenix, Arizona. Craig will be there, as well as a few others from our team. So go find them if you're at NCBFAA. We think it's going to be a pretty hot show, especially since everything's going to start coming to light tomorrow. So again, thank you, and thanks for joining us, and we'll start diving in here. So new question here in the context. Let me switch it over to this one. In the context of recent U.S. trade policy, what term refers to the group of countries targeted with reciprocal tariffs due to their significant trade surpluses and perceived unfair trade practices? Give everybody a second here. This has been in the news recently, a term we'll go into in a minute, but I want to see how many of you are kind of paying attention and kept your ears perked up in relation to some countries that potentially will be hit hardest, but we will see tomorrow. Give it one more second. Here. All right, let's move this forward. Okay. All right, interesting. Okay, so the trade alliance at around 42%, the G7 nations around 17%, 24% around the top 15, and the export consortium. Okay, well, it's actually option number C here, the top 15 countries with a goods trade surplus over the US. We didn't include the actual phrase that's being kind of stated in the media and also been kind of coined by the US Treasury Secretary. If you've heard it, they've been calling this the Dirty 15. You know, we don't want to put it on here to offend any nations and partners of ours, but the Dirty 15 is basically what you've been hearing a lot in terms of potential countries that are going to be the most impacted by some of the news tomorrow on April 2nd around reciprocals. And basically what they've been stating recently are these countries are characterized by large trade surpluses with the US, high tariffs on American goods, and non-tariff barriers such as regulatory restrictions or domestic production requirements. And some of the countries have already been in the news in relation to tariffs imposed on them. So some on that list are China, Canada, the EU, Mexico, Vietnam, etc. So they've been part of these 15 countries that have been alluded to in the news of potentially speculative of going to receive the highest or most impactful amounts of tariff because of how they've been trading with us previously. So again, time will tell over the next 24 hours of what that is, but thought this would be an interesting question just in terms of how this phrase has been thrown around in a lot of trade articles recently. So we'll kick it off as normal, and our goal at Avalara is to keep everybody informed on the latest trade changes across our clients and our partners, so everybody can stay proactive, prepared, and try to help out with any sort of disruptions that come across the board. But just a refresher on the past 7 weeks, the U.S. is considering significant trade changes aimed at curbing fentanyl and illegal immigrations. But obviously, these supply changes are disrupting supply chains, as well as other business challenges across the board here. So again, since February 1st, there's been new tariffs, removal of de minimis, retaliatory actions, notices of sweeping trade changes, not yet announced, coming tomorrow. And we've been keeping everybody up to date in terms of what we've been able to learn based upon what's publicized out there. So going into the timeline events here, you know, for those of you that have been joining us week over week, you're probably, hopefully this has continued to be of value of you, and you now are able to go walk through this yourself. But this really all started on February 1st when Canada and Mexico, U.S. had imposed 25% tariffs on Canada, Mexico, 10% on China. Within 48 hours, then Canada proposed retaliatory tariffs back on the U.S., as did China, doing speculation on additional retaliatory tariffs. Within that, by the end of that day, though, Canada had backed off, and basically all proposed changes for Canada and Mexico had been punted to March 4th. Based upon some concessions that they were going to be making around the border. Now, on February 7th, as part of that February 1st date, de minimis was basically removed. And again, de minimis is the value of parcels under $800 that are not assessed at duty. Reinstatement of de minimis came back into play on February 7th. And again, for those that have you been following the whole trade war, and even over the past 18 months or so, this whole de minimis piece has continued to be a hot topic for parcels coming in under $800, just because of the safety concerns of the inbound parcels coming in, primarily from China. Again, there was about 1.34 billion de minimis parcels in 2024 compared to 125 in 2015. So again, 10x within 9 years. But this has really been a key crux of this whole piece here. Of the trade war and relation. But the amount of volume that was coming through prior to that February 7th date when they removed de minimis, they couldn't process the amount of volume that was coming through. So Trump actually stated that they're reinstating de minimis until adequate systems are in place to fully and expediently process and collect tariff revenue. So we still continue, everybody's asking us crystal ball on things that we expect. We do think that this is still going to be a significant topic moving forward in the trade war around de minimis. Now, whether that is they're going to remove de minimis, lower the de minimis value, our sneaking suspicion, just based upon legislation that's been out there over the past 18 months, is that they are going to be very require additional information on goods coming into the U.S., things like product descriptions, country of origin, full HS classifications outside of just the HS6, a full HS10, and other pieces of information to understand what are the contents in there. So this whole de minimis piece, if you've been following these webinars, this is still continues to be kind of the question mark, but a significant topic within the whole trade war piece. So more to come on that. February 10th was when they announced that on March 12th that there was going to be a 25% tariff on steel and aluminum. China then imposed 15% on coal and liquefied natural gas products from the U.S., an additional 10% on oil. Going into February 13th, this is really the date in which this whole reciprocal piece started to get some traction. So the date wasn't announced on February 13th for this April 2nd Liberation Day, but this is February 13th was really when this started to be alluded to in the media. So then on February 18th here, proposed tariffs on automobiles, semiconductors, pharmaceuticals. Additional news sources were reporting some of the confusion in relation to when the Canada-Mexico 25% tariffs would come back in place. That ended up happening on March 4th. So you can see here on March 2nd, it was confirmed that those were going to go into play. March 4th happens, those 25% tariffs go back into play, and then within a matter of hours, basically they were pulled back. And really, currently, right now, with those 25% tariffs on Canada and Mexico, they are only impactful on goods coming in from Canada or Mexico that are not part of USMCA. And really, what that means is that they have not received substantial transformation within either Canada, Mexico, or the U.S. So just the perspective here, the amount of goods coming into the U.S. from Canada that are considered USMCA are only 30%. Goods from Mexico into the U.S. is 50%. So this is also going to be re-examined. We're going to find out what happens tomorrow in terms of these 25% tariffs. Are they going to stick for imports coming in from Canada or Mexico that are not USMCA, or are these going to be we don't know what's going to happen here. So more to come. This was really the second phase on this piece. The other piece on this March 4th date, though, was Canada did put 25% on retaliatory tariffs across $30 billion worth of American goods. So this was phase one of them, putting additional retaliatory tariffs on U.S. goods on here.
We'll go into a quick question that came in from Carla. In Canada, notice to impose counter tariffs in response to U.S. tariffs. The Canadian HS codes are listed with 8 digits. Do the last 2 digits determine when trying to determine the HS code will apply to our products, or only 6-digit? And I think the answer to this is twofold. The more information you have, the better data you get. So if it's opposed to 8-digit level, you'll need to add those next 2 digits to get the actual duty and tariff. I don't think there's anything. I haven't seen many tariffs. I haven't seen the full list of Canadian tariffs. So I don't know if it goes to the 10 or 12-digit level. So
yeah, no, and we could actually send you probably follow up and send a link to the Canadian government. They actually have all of the HS codes listed on their site, so you can actually go through there and see all what's currently now over close to $60 billion of goods impacted. So we can follow up with you. I believe it was Carla, and get you that list of the HS codes that are impacted. But normally, anytime a government puts anything into play here, they will have to list what goods are being impacted. And obviously, HS classifications are the unique identifiers of those specific goods. In the U.S., when the goods are targeted for any sort of tariffs, etc. The U.S. actually has a federal registrar. They will actually post those goods in those HS classifications of those goods that are going to be impacted. So the U.S. will publish it on their site, and then for the Canadian ones, if they're imposing tariffs, they will also list it on their government site, because that's basically the content in the trade world that everybody is going to have to adhere to based upon government standards. So again, we can follow up with you on the list of those HS codes that are impacted as part of that $60 billion there on U.S. goods. Let's see, on March 12th here, then we have the 25% steel and aluminum tariffs come into play. Canada started pausing additional escalating tariffs, and also Ontario started putting on some interesting tariffs around electricity for three states that was going to impact around 1.5 million folks. Here we go on the 13th, the second 25% reciprocal tariffs on the second $30 billion of goods from Canada was imposed. So again, Canada currently now sits at around $60 billion worth of goods from the U.S. that are impacted with this 25% tariff. Then on March 20th here, we have the Venezuela oil tariff. Basically, President Trump announced that there's 25% tariff on countries that buy oil and gas from Venezuela. Then the EU, who had previously, announced that it was going to impose additional tariffs on U.S. goods, basically said we're putting it on pause until we find out what happens on April 2nd. And then the latest here on March 26th was basically this whole 25% tariff on all cars that are not made in the United States, which is supposed to take effect tomorrow. So again, I'm sure everybody has seen that one, specifically on the cars, based upon what's happening in the media. So where have we landed this week? Again, China here, we have the 10% on China, and then there was the additional 20% imposed on March 4th. Canada, 25% tariffs on goods that do not qualify under USMCA. Ontario has paused the 25% tariffs on electricity to those three states, but then there are close to $60 billion of retaliatory tariffs on U.S. goods coming into Canada. 25% tariffs for Mexico, again, on the goods that are not qualifying for USMCA. And then the major things upcoming and that are currently in place, 25% on steel and aluminum are in place, 25% on automobiles set to take effect tomorrow. Tomorrow, this Liberation Day, across the board, we will find out what's happening. And that's really the next piece here of what we'll learn. So implications of your business, Craig had previously had this slide up a couple of weeks ago, but I think it's good, revisiting here the difference between country of origin versus point of origin, because these tariffs are really coming into play based upon where a good's country of origin is. So again, country of origin specifically is where substantial transformation takes place of that good. And again, for goods that are being tariffs that are impacting, China, it's for goods that are specifically having that country of origin China, not where that good is shipping from. So if it's a Chinese good shipping from, let's say, Germany, the country of origin is still going to be China, and it's still going to impose that 30% rate on it, not where it is shipping from, where it's fulfilling from, even if it is already in the U.S. and fulfilling from the U.S. The country of origin is from one of these countries that we had alluded to here. That's how the tariff and duty rates come into play on this piece. And, again, we've been getting questions of, well, how do we prepare for these pieces? A lot of it really is going to come down to making sure that you have the appropriate product descriptions for your products in the catalog, understanding where your country of origin is, understanding any sort of pricing around it, as well as a full HS10 on those goods based upon where they're being a country of where they're being imported into. Again, this is all going to be critical moving forward, especially if they start removing de minimis for the U.S. Trade war implications with Canada. We've been mentioning over the previous webinars that we've been having is, some of these social posts that have been going up online around, Canadian liquor stores basically pulling Canadian alcohol off their shelves, even though there's a 25% tariff on it. Now Canadians are actually just straight up pulling this from liquor stores. So the top right picture is from one of one of the liquor stores in Canada that's making its way around a lot of the news sources, and they're just pulling U.S. Liquor from these stores and basically putting up Buy Canada instead. And this has led to some interesting pieces. Brown-Forman, mentioned during their earnings call 3 weeks ago that a tariff is one thing that consumers can deal with a price increase, but when you're straight up pulling goods off shelves and they don't have any ability to buy is completely different. So you can see the quote here. The other thing that's starting to kind of hit the markets is in relation to any sort of statistics on what impact this is having from a U.S. and Canadian perspective on this whole kind of Buy Canada, boycotting U.S. goods, shifting to more Canadian buying behavior. So there's been a 23% year-over-year decline in the number of Canadians taking round trips into the U.S. In February versus 2024, and that's specifically from Stats Canada. So that was February when all of this started coming into play. I'm going to be really interested to see what stat that is in March as everything is heated up even more. The other stat that's really hit the wire here is that the Quebec Tourism Industry Alliance has come out, and they said that there's been a 45% of Canadian or Quebec residents who plan vacations in the U.S. here are now canceling those plans. So again, very interesting to see how this continues to move forward. Metrics on March, but also as we go into April here and what we find out tomorrow. And then the bottom, you may have seen this also in the media, tariffs are a tax on your grocery bill. The Canadian government has basically put up these billboards in 12 states around the U.S., which is getting, a variety of responses across the board here. But again, this whole thing is currently right now, you're seeing that this whole boycotting U.S. goods, pulling U.S. goods off the shelves in Canada, and this nationalism that's happening in Canada right now.
Hey, Shane, a couple questions on the board. So if the software was developed in Canada and it's a subscription service, web-based, is that taxable or tariffable? And taxable is not the right question. Does it have a duty or tariff? I don't know if digital goods. I don't have that exact answer on digital goods. Typically unrelated because there's no crossing the border on a digital good. And we'll get back to that answer for you, Gary. Sorry. And then there was a question that came in. Sorry, I saw one on. All right, I believe so. Stephanie asked. I believe the additional tariffs for China are plus 20%. If I'm reading this right, the slide it states 10 plus 20%. Can you confirm?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, there were the additional 20%, I believe, came into play on March 4th or the March 2nd. It's in our timeline, but yeah, it was the original 10% and then additional 20% was put into play in March. Yeah, March 4th, additional 20. Okay. This is also another new slide. We've been getting, some questions on the manufacturing, piece of, will increasing tariffs increase U.S. manufacturing? And that's been part of the administration's, ultimate end goal here is, return manufacturing to the U.S., rely on less imports, et cetera. So you've probably seen in the news a lot of companies saying that they're going to start building more in the U.S. Hyundai came out with announced a steel plant in Louisiana. Honda, Apple announced something back at the end of February, I believe. But the real question here is, and it also goes back to our poll that we've been usually asking is, a lot of these businesses are holding and waiting until what they find out tomorrow. I think the whole decision to make any giant moves like this is really on pause until something sticks more than a couple weeks. And you can see the CFO from GM here kind of had something similar, but I think they really need to understand, are these reciprocal duties and tariffs going to stick in order to warrant these manufacturers to move to the US? Or are these also going to be pulled off if another country's reciprocals are eliminated? So everybody is waiting for something to stick longer than a couple weeks. I'm hopeful we get some answers tomorrow in terms of what's going to happen, and then businesses can start really making decisions. I'm just going to fast forward here and go to our next poll here, because this is something we've been asking week over week. This one here. So are you planning to adjust your supply chain due to impending global trade changes, duties, tariff regulation changes in any of the following ways? So again, if we'll give everybody here a couple seconds, but again, this is a poll we've been asking for the past 7 weeks. We've been compiling the data across the board. The trends have been very interesting. I'll show you what the past 6 weeks have been, but let's get everybody here just to what everybody's current mind frame is at the moment. All right, I'm going to move forward. Okay, so we have 16%, 17% or so diversifying suppliers, around 13% switching to local suppliers, rethinking distribution is the second highest, and I think 62%. Yep, I don't know yet. So funny because I don't know yet continued. If you look at the left side here, I don't know yet started out when we started these webinars as being the top ones. Then there started to be some solidification in terms of some of the tariff rates. Now, because of this April 2nd piece, we've seen week over week that I don't know yet continues to be a top one, just like we're seeing some of these CEOs, some of these manufacturers out there saying, I don't know what we're going to do yet until we really get clear guidance in terms of what the US is going to do, what other nations are going to do, et cetera. So that is not surprising. It's actually going to, I don't know yet. I think what I say, 62% here. This is currently now, one of the highest ones yet. We're actually going to need another index here above the 60% on the next graph for next week. So appreciate that. We are here in terms of helping out with all of these things. Our team of content engineers is on standby. We have 250 individuals that are helping classify goods across the board here. So when changes originally went in place on February 4th, we were able, as I was alluding to earlier, talking about the federal registrar and some of these government sites, we were easily able to put these into play, be proactive. When they pulled them, we turned them off on the 7th. Same thing happened on March 4th, and then also on March 7th as well. So this is how we can help across the board. And just a refresher, we really can help across 3 areas. Calculations of duties and tariff rates across the board. We have a portfolio of tariff code classification services from self-serve services, 250 individuals that will manually classify your goods, to automated machine learning AI capabilities. And then we have trade restrictions content and trade content across the board here. So if you're looking to understand your HS code for something that's being imported to the US, does that have countervailing duties on it? What is the duty rate on it? Are there PGAs associated with it? These are things that we can easily affix here and help across the board. Because again, going back to that whole de minimis piece, although tariffs are changing daily, we do foresee that product classifications are going to be incredibly scrutinized moving forward, especially on goods coming in de minimis. Last piece here, I mentioned, next 24 hours should be an interesting one. We are trying to synthesize all the information tomorrow and have our trade talk on April 3rd. So that is Thursday. We'll get as much done as humanly possible. Last, question, if you need to connect with anybody, please let us know. My team's the one that is actually reaching out automatically to anybody who's saying yes on this piece. So more than happy to get on a call, talk with you, any sort of questions. We will try to connect with you as soon as humanly possible within a 24-hour time frame. Just gave a second here. And then George, any questions?
Yeah, we've got a lot of questions around are tariffs taxable? And we can't answer that from a tax advice standpoint, but I will tell you that tariffs increase the price of a good. If you pass that on to a customer, you are potentially raising your taxable price of the goods. So there's a bunch of, this is US to US, obviously. I think from Scott Peterson, to be exempt, there must be a specific statute. And I'm not aware of any specific statute or state law that exempts these things. There are a couple states that exempt federal excise taxes, but very few. So we'll try to have a better answer for you guys next time. But a lot of these questions are great questions on the taxability of a tariff. The struggle is, how are you applying those to your items? Are they B2B, B2C? Are they being applied at the line item? Are they being added to the price? Are they being applied at the total invoice level? So all these do have different factors into this. But like when I first came into the tax business 5 years ago, the question I asked is if you exchange an apple for an orange at a flea market, is it taxable? And the answer is yes. And so, as you document these price increases, please go to your tax advisors and ask them these questions. We'll try to have a more succinct answer, as general as we can make it, but there's a lot of very specific questions. So not trying to avoid the question. It's just a very difficult one for us to answer.
Yeah. Okay. And another one we're seeing come up also frequently and also here is, how does my good qualify for USMCA? That's another one where, again, this is going to be determined by if it's considered substantial transformation on that good. Our advice is to, if you have a trade attorney or if you have a broker, they should be able to help you out here. That's not something, unfortunately, we can determine. There's a lot that goes specifically into that around substantial transformation. So that would be our guidance on that piece. George, anything else? Or I know we're at the top here.
No, that's the major. If we missed anything, we apologize. There's a lot of questions were coming in today, so I tried to answer as fast as possible. We'll follow up after the call today and tomorrow.
Sounds good. Well, thanks again, everybody. Please register for April 3rd, and I'm sure everybody will keep their eyes out on everything that happens tomorrow. But thanks again.
Thank you.
Thanks, Shane and George. Just a quick reminder to close out. You will receive a post-event email later today with a link back to this console where you can get the recording, the slide deck, and the additional resources. We do hope you can join us on Thursday for that special edition. We'll have instructions in the post-event email for how to register for that. But otherwise, that concludes today's webinar. Thanks for joining.